What did your parents teach you that you had to unlearn? Story 1. Communicating my feelings and how to properly express them. My family has some horrible communication skills. It's not something I realized until my husband pointed it out to me when we first started dating. We had a tendency to explode, then completely shut down, and not speak to each other if we ever got into an argument. Sometimes we would say the meanest possible thing just to hurt the other person. Occasionally, the arguments would turn violent, but that was usually between my sister and I. My parents never turned violent. Admitting that we were wrong about something was also difficult for us. Also, mind reading. If something was upsetting us, we would never express it and just left it to the other person to guess what was wrong. My husband thought it was crazy how we communicated with each other. And again, I didn't realize it until he pointed it out. It took years, and I honestly still struggle with it, but have a much easier time analyzing a situation and expressing my feelings in a calm manner. Story 2. That I don't need to obsessively conserve everything. We weren't poor when I was growing up, but we had a pretty tight budget and not a lot of extra money for anything. My dad would pour water into chocolate syrup to make it last longer. Same with soap. I always felt bad about finishing something, like a package of crackers or a jar of peanut butter. This has persisted into my life now. My parents collectively make a lot more money, plus I have my own part-time job. I still find myself not using enough shampoo in the shower because I don't want to use it up too quickly, or when I get my monthly Sephora Play box, those samples last forever because I feel bad finishing them, even though that's literally what they're for. I have a really hard time throwing anything away that I can think of any kind of use for, even if I know I'm not going to use it. It's a struggle. Story 3. If you're going to do something, be the best there is at that thing or it's not worth doing. Play in the band? Be the first chair. Join a team? Win the game. Be the captain. Score a goal. An A- is practically a B, and a B might as well be failing. It's led to a life of success, respect, stress, fear of failure, inadequacy, and depression. There isn't much I can do purely because I enjoy it, and even those things leave me feeling guilty and shameful that I wasn't doing something more important. So I haven't quite unlearned it yet, but I'm working on it. Sounds like my sister. I've always said I don't want to be a boss or leader of any kind because I'm simply not the type of person for that. And someone has to be in the lower echelons of the workforce, and she's like, wow, way to be lazy. Story 4. Growing up, people in my family talked up my dad as a good driver, and I believed them. My grandfather, on my mother's side, was his biggest advocate, and my dad always vouched for his driving as well. So I internalized that, and that became my idea of a good driver. A few years ago, my grandfather and dad drove a family friend around, and that was when I learned that they're both overly aggressive, impatient, and risk-taking drivers. Now that it's been pointed out to me, I always notice all the tailgating, lack of signaling, and questionable lane changing. Story 5. Not to trust men. My mom held a very low opinion of my dad, and a low opinion of men in general as well. I was raised to believe that they are essentially emotionless aggression robots whose sole desire is to take advantage of women. It didn't help much that a man actually tried to kidnap me as a young child. I started noticing something wasn't right at about 13 to 14 years old, and had some guy friends. I learned better intellectually very quickly, but the underlying emotions of fear and distrust took a while to go away. You have to get close with men before they'll show you emotions. Generally, there are exceptions, so I didn't really get to see that until I was close with some. I truly got it maybe by about 21. I feel I'm misrepresenting my mom here, so I want to clarify. She is not a feminist hippie. Farthest from it. She just grew up in a traditional Mennonite town where women were seen as property. She is learning better these days. Story 6. It took a lot of soul-searching on my part to realize that getting a degree from a prestigious university and getting a ridiculously high-paying job is not the only path to happiness, and that I'm allowed to make happiness my number one priority. I was raised to believe that I would be a complete failure if I didn't go to university right after high school and make as much money as possible. Taking a gap year was not an option. Going to trade school was not an option. Money came before happiness because money would lead to happiness. I ended up dropping out. My family disowned me. I beat myself up, thinking I never amount to anything. I fought through the worst depression I'd ever experienced and worked many short-lived jobs over the course of 5 years, until, by pure coincidence, I stumbled upon my true calling in life. I took what was supposed to be a temporary job at my local animal shelter. Within the first week, I knew it was what I was meant to do. I've worked there for 2 years now. I come home covered in puke, poop, and blood every day. I cry for those animals almost every day. I only make $8 an hour, but I would do my job for free, and I absolutely love every second of it. Story 7. They taught me that it's okay to be friends with black or brown people, but it's not okay to date them. The Bible says so. Them reminding me of that when I started 7th grade made me question my belief in a deity and stop respecting their moral guidance. I'm still unlearning years later. I get mildly uncomfortable around black people I've never met before, and I hate myself for it. Story 8. My parents would spend and spend and spend and would lavish themselves with gifts without thinking of the long-term consequences. If I tried to save money, I was considered selfish. Guess what? My dad would be broke because of all that spending on expensive things, and we would hardly be able to afford the bread. LOL. I used to be like this and would blow through money without a second thought, which didn't really work out for me in the long run. Now that I'm a bit older, I saved quite a bit of money in case of emergencies. I just choose not to disclose the amount of money I had collected because I know it would be stolen by my dad for groceries. Yeah, right. Story 9. Getting in trouble for having mediocre or bad grades, or for getting in any sort of trouble at school. If a kid picked on me, I tried to stand up, get a note in my agenda, and my mom just screams at me. That made me forge signatures, hide bad grades, lie about my marks, shut down about what actually went down in school, because I was just scared of my parents just freaking out at me. I remember I got a C+ on an English assignment in grade 5, and my mom was too upset to talk to me, so she sat at the kitchen table with me, and we wrote notes back and forth, while she was on the phone with my dad saying how mad she was. How about she ask why I got a bad grade, or if I was having trouble with material, or if there was any way I could improve for next time. Story 10. You're not hungry, you're just bored. You're not hungry, you're just thirsty, drink water. I didn't realize how much it affected me until I realized I never felt hungry. I completely lost the ability to trust my body to tell me it needed food. Eventually, I realized it wasn't normal to go 3 or 4 days without eating. Thanks, Mom! Story 11. I had to unlearn only liking boring foods. My parents both completely lacked the ability to actually cook and could do little more than heat things up. While growing up and not eating out or getting carry-out, we would regularly eat things like well-done steaks, pasta with ragu, meatloaf, pork chops, cheeseburgers with American cheese, macaroni and cheese, hot dogs, and buttered noodles. All very, very, very simple things heated up with the least effort and least taste possible. But when you're a kid, that's all you're used to. I thought a lot of foods, like sushi, were weird, and I refused to try them. When I finally graduated and got a well-paying job, I started to explore other foods. I quickly realized that a lot of those weird foods are absolutely delicious. I enjoyed pretty much everything I tried and have since left the ragu world as nothing but a distant and not very fond memory. When visiting my parents recently, they cooked a dinner of spaghetti with ragu, and it was absolutely disgusting. I ate a small amount to be polite and then said I wasn't very hungry. Story 12. Saying no or voicing my dislike about something to my parents is not disrespectful or talking back. When I was little, every time I'd voice to my parents about how I disliked doing something, I was scolded for it and was told I was talking back. This further discouraged me to talk about my feelings in general unless it was something positive that they would want to hear or something that I wouldn't receive flack about. I ended up being passive-aggressive instead of opening up about how I feel. It took getting depression to realize that it was unhealthy to keep my feelings to myself, and it's not burdening or disrespectful to talk about how I feel. Story 13. That putting off paying your student loans won't affect your credit. Stuff for school is completely unrelated to credit. 19-year-old me unlearned this the hard way. Now finally, after 4 years, my credit score has started to improve. Thankfully, I got married at 19 to someone who knows how to be financially responsible. My husband has taught me more about credit management in the last 4 years than my parents have my entire life. Story 14. Don't speak unless spoken to, and don't speak when adults are speaking. At what point do you consider yourself an adult? When I had already started college, I still wasn't considering myself an adult, so it was difficult to network with older professionals. Don't speak unless you know. I'm still trying to unlearn this. No, I'm not shy and have issues speaking in front of the class, but I'm not going to raise my hand and participate by guessing what the answer is if I'm not sure I know the answer to the question. Someone is always watching what you're doing. No, nobody gives a hoot what you're doing. This has given me so much anxiety, thinking people are always staring at me, waiting for me to mess up. Sticks and stones may break your bones, but words can never hurt you. Bullshiz! Words can hurt you and can hurt others. In case you can't tell, I was a very literal kid. Story 15. That anything that happened to my body was my fault and I needed to be punished for it. Oh, you have a virus? Well, you shouldn't have been playing where you could get sick. Why are you taking so long in the bathroom? I had chronic constipation. Don't eat so much next time. Did you just vomit? Why did you eat just to vomit it all back up? Doctor visit proved I had a stomach bug. Took me forever to realize that sometimes you get sick, even if you are taking the best care of your body. Story 16. That your body is secret and private and shameful. Me and my brother washed and showered or dressed ourselves from a very, very young age, and as someone who began puberty very early, I was told to cover up basically head to toe from the age of about 10. I wasn't allowed shorts or skirts or dresses because my family thought that my wearing clothes that were cool and showed some skin made me promiscuous. Funny thing is that in pretty much every other way, my family are pretty liberal and totally non-religious. I am a pretty big girl now, and even at 22 years of age, I can't go into my mother's house in a dress or low-cut top without her saying, "No one wants to see that." It's weird and has had some pretty annoying effects on my relationship over the years. I recently found out that many people had a naked phase as kids, or their mother would walk around the house in a towel and couldn't believe it. Story 17. I had to unlearn their entire mentality on relationships. Remember, parents teach by example, not by words. Yelling, screaming, calling names, violence, drinking, and hard drugs were the example my dad set. I got the hell away from them and focused on my own mentality. Somehow I wound up with an amazing wife who shows me what love should be. I still battle demons. Can't be around yelling and screaming arguments. I just shut down. I pretty much had to quit drinking too. But I'm growing every day. Story 18. That if you are able to do something yourself, it's shameful to hire someone to do it. I know how to change my oil and brake pads. I know how to pour cement. I know how to trim and landscape the yard. But opportunity cost is also a thing, and I shouldn't feel bad paying money to free up time to not have to do those things. My parents would just not take care of doing some of these things on the principle that they could do them themselves if they wanted to. Story 19. When someone offers you something like food, money, a ride, or help, politely decline. Even something simple like going to a friend's house and they ask if I want something to eat or drink. This was something I really had to unlearn from my mom, who would constantly say, "Oh no, thank you, that's okay," to everything. If people don't want to offer anything, they won't. But when they do, it's okay to say yes, and they usually want you to. It took me a long time to realize and apply that. Story 20. My parents taught me that women were inferior to men. As a child, I asked my mom about women being pastors, and she straight up told me that women weren't allowed to pastor a church because they were women and less than men. Like, WTF, Mom? I still remember the exact conversation and how that shaped me. If I want to be a pastor, I'm going to be a pastor. I don't want to be one anymore, but I'll be damned if someone tells me that I can't do or be something. Story 21. That I was supposed to take care of her for the rest of my life because she took care of me for the first 17. That I was lucky she didn't abort me. That yelling profanities at me and calling me a little bee wasn't abuse. That hitting me with a belt wasn't abuse. That drinking until blackout drunk was having fun. That doing massive amounts of pills was okay because the dog gave them to her. That snoring pills was cool because it didn't matter how she took them. That trashing my room looking for my diary and reading it was okay, and well within her rights because she was concerned about, yes, I was having sex, but guess what? I dated the same dude all through high school and married him and had his baby. I was safe. I had to learn it was and is okay to love myself. It's okay to put on comfort weight and enjoy it. It is okay to trust your SO 100% and be best friends. It's also okay to have rules for your SO and he have them for you. Not big ones, but small requests. She made me have to completely rewrite who I was, and I had to do so much soul searching. I wasn't me, but just an extension of her. It was disgusting, and I am so happy to no longer be with that person. Story 22. That I have to walk on eggshells to keep the people around me from having angry outbursts. My parents had a lot of issues, individually and as a couple, that caused them to react strongly to the tiniest, most unpredictable things. My mother especially tends to misinterpret innocent statements as insults or accusations. It caused me to develop some pretty serious social anxiety when I was growing up. I was constantly afraid that I'd say the wrong thing or F up somehow and end up getting yelled at. It wasn't until I was most of the way through high school that I realized stable, rational people don't pull that kind of stuff. Story 23. I was raised in a Christian house on Christian values, always taught to turn the other cheek and treat others as you would like them to treat you, etc. While this isn't intrinsically wrong, it left me poorly prepared for adulthood. I would go out of my way to help others and put my own needs last, even behind perfect strangers. This led to me being taken advantage of a lot throughout my teens and early adult life. People would see my selflessness as weakness and use me. I eventually learned the hard way to stand up for myself, but even today, I have to fight the urge to bend over backwards for others and am nervous about pressing my own agenda in any situation. It drives my fiancée nuts sometimes, but to her credit, she's helped a lot. Like I said, I don't think my parents were wrong for teaching me that, but a footnote along the lines of, "But bear in mind that some people are dicks," wouldn't have hurt. Story 24. My dad tried to drill into my head that I always, no matter what, had to try new things. I was a picky kid when it came to eating or doing new things, and he'd just make a massive effing deal out of it whenever he tried to make me do or eat something new. New food? Well, if you don't eat it, you'll have a terrible life and hate yourself and be miserable. Turns out screaming at a kid for 3 hours while their food gets cold before finally forcing them to eat it doesn't really help the taste, and now I basically only eat the same 4 things because trying anything new makes me feel sick to my stomach, remembering how awful it used to be every time. Pa loved me in the wrong direction, and I now actually am bored and miserable eating the same things all the time. Thanks, Dad. Oh, and my mom taught me to immediately spend money whenever I got it. Anytime I got more than, say, $40 or so, she'd end up having to borrow it and I never see it again. So instead of ever being able to save up for things, I just had to have a running list of everything I wanted and immediately buy every single thing I possibly could as soon as I got money, or else I'd never get to. Now I have a real problem where, whenever I have extra money, I immediately have to seek out something to spend it on or it drives me insane. Story 25. That eating everything on my plate was a sign of a good person, and leaving food uneaten was a terrible sin. Children starving in this world and such. Guilt like that helps lead to ignoring your body trying to tell you you've had enough and weight problems further down the line.